from names from the Democratic primary in New York, and Jeffrey Kay reports from Los Angeles on the latest in Japan bashing.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by PepsiCo. Part of helping the world live and communicate better is keeping it well informed. That's why funding for the NewsHour is also provided by AT&T and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
Today was presidential primary day in New York, Wisconsin, Kansas, and Minnesota. For the Democrats, New York was the big one. Bill Clinton and Jerry Brown devoted most of their last 2 weeks to that state. Paul Tsongas was also expected to be a factor there, as well as in the other 3 states. His name is still on the ballot, even though he suspended his campaign more than 2 weeks ago. On the Republican side, there is no primary in New York, but President Bush was expected to easily defeat challenger Pat Buchanan everywhere else. We'll have more on all of it later in the program. Robin?
An underground gas pipeline exploded in Texas this morning. The fiery blast killed at least 1 person and injured 16. It happened in a rural area just south of the East Texas town of Brenham. The force of the explosion was felt as far away as Galveston, more than 90 miles to the southeast. The blast flattened and scorched homes in the immediate vicinity. Livestock lay dead in the fields. Officials at Rice University in Houston said it registered about 4 on the Richter scale used to measure earthquakes.
President Boris Yeltsin told the Russian Congress today a strong presidency was needed to push through free market reforms. He warned against reducing his powers. He also issued a decree reasserting Russian control over the Black Sea fleet. Ukraine's president did the same thing yesterday, claiming the entire force for his republic. We have a report from Gabby Ratto of Independent Television News.
It is a day during which Congress deputies' anger at the Ukraine's unilateral seizure of the Black Sea Fleet continued to rise. Finally, this evening, the Commander-in-Chief of the Commonwealth Armed Forces announced that President Yeltsin was retaliating with a decree of his own. The St. Andrew flag of Russia will be raised over the ships of the Black Sea Fleet in accordance with the orders of the commanding officer of the Commonwealth Armed Forces. The Black Sea Fleet is based in the Crimean port of Sevastopol, which is on Ukrainian territory, though most naval personnel are Russian. A possible compromise deal giving Ukraine over a fifth of the fleet's ships seems to have collapsed.
Ukraine violated this treaty, and it is a very bad thing. It is impossible to live peacefully, to live in coordination with a country which violates its own signatures 3, 4, 5 days after the signature.
Earlier in the day, President Yeltsin confirmed that Russia was to set up its own armed forces, a warning that she would from now on be standing up for her rights.
Secretary of State Baker said today Ukrainian leaders should still ship battlefield nuclear weapons to Russia for dismantling. He spoke in a satellite news conference with reporters in Europe. He said U.S. aid could be curtailed if Ukraine tries to maintain its own nuclear force. The United States today officially recognized 3 Yugoslav republics as independent states. They are Croatia, Slovenia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. Yugoslav warplanes launched attacks on Bosnia today. 6 people were reported killed in a raid on a town near the capital. A Yugoslav army statement said it had targeted a military installation, not civilian targets.
In Peru, more opposition leaders were arrested today as President Alberto Fujimori expanded his crackdown. He dissolved Congress and suspended the Constitution on Sunday, a move that was sharply criticized by the U.S. and other nations. We have a report narrated by Vera Frankel of Worldwide Television News.
Demonstrators who took to the streets of Lima felt the full force of the crackdown. Senator Raul Ferrero Cooper, one of Fujimori's main opponents, was manhandled and pushed to the ground by police outside the law school, while others received harsher treatment. And if more proof were needed of the security forces' resolve, live rounds were fired over the heads of the crowd. Volleys of tear gas finally sent the protesters into retreat. The day's only act of defiance conclusively suppressed. The president's troops were standing firm against any other act of dissent. In the corridors of power, President Fujimori was being equally assertive. He's already sworn in a new cabinet, and Fujimori adopted a new law which justifies the goals of his authoritarian government. Fujimori says the crackdown is aimed at stamping out corruption and terrorism, at modernizing and improving the standard of living of Peruvians. Whatever the intent, his grasp on power is no longer in question.
The Bush administration today cut off all military and economic aid to Peru. White House spokeswoman Judy Smith said the U.S. was consulting with its allies to determine a possible further response to the situation there.
Congressional investigators said today the Gulf War effectiveness of the Patriot missile may have been overstated. The Army has said the surface-to-air guided missile system engaged more than 60% of the Scuds fired at Saudi Arabia and Israel. The General Accounting Office said today the Army's own data does not support that claim. But at a congressional hearing, Army Major General Jay Warner defended the Patriot, saying the bottom line was that the U.S. won the war and the Patriot played a large part in that victory. Iraq agreed today to destroy buildings and equipment at what is believed to be the center of its atomic weapons program. The Al-Althir complex is located 25 miles south of Baghdad. A team of UN inspectors are on their way there. They hope to begin destruction tomorrow.
America's Teacher of the Year was honored at the White House today. He is Thomas Fleming, a 59-year-old history, government, and geography teacher from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Thomas was a high school dropout who went on to earn a high school equivalency degree and later a master's degree in special education. He has taught 12 to 16-year-olds at a one-room schoolhouse in a juvenile detention center for the past 20 years. The Teacher of the Year is selected by the Council of Chief State School Officers and the Encyclopedia Britannica Company.
The Pulitzer Prizes were awarded today. In journalism, the major ones went to the Sacramento Bee, the Dallas Morning News, New York Newsday, and the Kansas City Star. The Commentary Prize went to columnist Anna Quindlen of the New York Times. In the arts, Jane Smiley won for her novel, 1,000 Acres, Daniel Yergin for his nonfiction book, The Prize, The Epic Quest for Oil, Money, and Power, and Robert Schenken for his play, The Kentucky Cycle. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to some discouraging words from voters. What now for the Democrats and Japanese bashing?
On this primary night, we have one of our periodic special reports using polling data from the Times-Mirror Center for the People and the Press. In 1987, Times-Mirror developed a voter classification system based on political and social values as well as party identification. This typology divides the electorate into 9 groups, identifying several core Republican and Democratic constituencies as well as 3 basically independent groups. In their latest national survey, the Times-Mirror found 66% of the voters said they were dissatisfied with all the presidential candidates. That dissatisfaction is reflected in one of the independent groups considered key swing voters this year. The group are the so-called seculars. They're considered more politically informed than most people, and the Times-Mirror pollsters have found them increasingly disdainful of the political process. In Denver, Charlene Hunter-Galt talked to 2 representatives of this group, both members of the same family.
Meet Scott and Martha McCormick. Married 7 years, so far no kids. The McCormicks fit the Times-Mirror profile of secular voters, the only group in America that professes no religious belief. Like the McCormicks, seculars are well-educated, white, and mostly independent. Only a minority of them think of themselves as Democrats, and in most cases they are not as politically active as some other well-informed and sophisticated groups. But in this family there are some exceptions, she being religious, he not, just as there are differences between the two. Scott McCormick is 32 years old. He is a self-employed computer consultant for architects and engineers. Unlike his wife, he's a registered Republican who voted for George Bush in 1988 and still leans toward the Republicans, but unhappily.
The world's changed. The when I was born and grew up, I always assumed that I'd have a better life than what my parents had. I always assumed that we'd have the Cold War in Europe. I always assumed that there'd be plenty to eat and that the economy would be great. Now, things have changed. All those sort of issues have flip-flopped, and I think they're vital that we look at them.
Are you personally affected by those things, like the state of the economy?
Well, I think things happen on a local level. As a small business, I feel like I'm out there daily trying to contribute to the economic well-being. Every small business that's out there, every entrepreneur that's out there is adding a layer of diversity to the economy. And I'm frustrated that I have so many things in my way to making it go. Local taxes, state taxes, federal taxes. I'm not looking for a loan or a handout. I'm just looking for a little less bureaucracy at really all scales of government.
You voted for George Bush in 1988, but you now don't feel you can support him. What happened?
I don't necessarily feel that I won't vote for Bush, but I'm disappointed that the economy isn't better off. I'm disappointed with the results of the war. I'm disappointed
Meaning
in
what?
that I think there was a lot of unfinished business. I think that the issues with the Kurds is terrible, what's continued to happen there. And I think it's a difficult issue for Bush. I'm not sure a lot of the blame for this can be placed on Bush, but we got into it, and it just seems to be unfinished. I think genocide is being practiced on the Kurds right now, and I can't tolerate that. I can't tolerate that anyway. There are some things that are worth fighting for.
But if you could summarize the main problem you're having with George Bush, it would be what?
He's missed a great opportunity. The New World Order it seems to be slipping right through our fingers. And I don't know how much of that we can contribute to and how much we should, but it was a chance for leadership, and I think good leadership, and it seems like we did nothing.
What about the Democratic side?
My problem is at heart I would love to be a Democrat, and I have voted back and forth ever since I started voting when I was 18.
Why would you like to be a Democrat?
I think the Democrats are ethically on the forefront of ethical issues, and the Republicans seem to be lagging a little bit, a little more conservative, a little less willing to change. That's a good sort of a good give and take.
Like ethical issues that, like what?
Environment, family, any value system that you look at, quality of life. The one issue that I think the GOP has always been better on has been in terms of strong economics. I think we've needed that, but now there's a few other issues that need to come in. If the Democratic Party were able to become a little more aware of this, and I think they are as a group trying to build in a better sensitivity to issues of economy, I think their planks would be a lot stronger in their platform.
What about the candidates specifically, Clinton and Brown?
I'm very disappointed, as I have been in most of the elections with the Democratic leadership. I have a very uneasy feeling about Clinton that's hard to put my finger on. I think as the debates continue and the information comes out, it's getting clearer why I feel that way. The business with not inhaling. I mean, it's a blatant lie, and
not inhaling the marijuana.
Right.
Honesty is important to you?
I think incredibly important, and I just don't trust that. There's something that's not very trusting in what I see there. I'm interested in someone that can run the country. I could care less if he has a divorce, if back in the 70s he smoked a little marijuana. That's not the issue.
What about Jerry Brown in terms of the values that are important to you?
Jerry Brown, I went to the University of Colorado Boulder, which is kind of like going to Berkeley, I guess. And Jerry Brown reminds me a lot of the professors that I saw there, and the kind that made you buy their books. The line Jay Leno had the other night about Jerry Brown's aspiration is beyond the president. He wants to be a Jedi Knight. I think that's who Jerry Brown's all about. and I would really like to vote for him. I think it would be interesting to see what would happen. And maybe that's my old Boulder days coming through. I'm not sure we want to trust the country to Jerry Brown just yet.
And what about Ross Perot?
Well, everybody keeps laughing about Perot, and I think he's real easy to say, yeah, let's vote for him, but we don't know where his values are. We know that he's a can-do guy, he's an interesting person, but we haven't heard what he has to say yet on a lot of issues. I'm very interested to see a little bit more about Perot. I'm also interested to see if things deadlock with the Democratic Party if Cuomo comes up out of New York. I think there's a candidate I'd be real interested in hearing and real interested in understanding, and that could definitely entice my vote.
Can you imagine not voting?
No.
That's important to you.
Yes, I'll vote. As I mentioned, I was the first group that got to vote when the voting was changed to allowing 18-year-olds to vote. I was 18 when Carter was elected. And I don't understand why people don't vote. I've never understood that. I enjoy it. I can't be very cynical about that. I guess I'd like a little honesty. I'd appreciate a politician saying, these are hard issues. They haven't ever been solved. We've had trouble in this region. We always will have trouble in this region, and it's difficult. And I'm not going to walk out here and say I have all the answers. When people vote, they're voting on ethics, whether they know it or not. You walk in and vote for a candidate because you think he's better looking than another candidate. You're really voting on an aesthetic issue. Maybe not the best issue to judge a candidate by, but it's nonetheless, it's an ethic. I think that's where I'm at. I've had this chance to see things change in this country and in the world, and it has formed my opinion.
And your generation?
I think I'm an in-between generation, between a generation a few years younger than me that's sort of a lost generation, sort of rebels without a clue or rebels without a cause. I don't know which.
Is it the conflict between idealism and pragmatism?
I had, I think, much more radical views on a lot of subjects when I was younger. I don't know the exact Russian proverb about as you get older, you become more conservative, and when you're younger, you're supposed to be more liberal. But a lot of my values have changed and gotten more conservative. But it's interesting because now I'm...
Give me an example.
Economy is a great example. I would say I'm a very strong believer in capitalism, free enterprise. I couldn't have said that, I don't think, in 1977. And yet other issues that I may have been conservative on have become, I have gone back around again. I've come full circle on.
Give me an example.
Environment's a great example. Very strongly aware of what was happening. It sort of slipped by the wayside as I got busy with career and other things. And now I think about it all the time. And it's becoming a very major issue. I think, in my mind, the number one issue in this election will be environment.
You said that you felt the GOP was losing touch with young people like yourself.
I think that's a definite danger. I think they've gathered a lot of strength. A lot of people have come their direction, but I think that their planks in their platform, they're really trying to hang on to a very strong, I would characterize it as maybe an older right-wing conservative, very right-wing conservative group. And I think it's very difficult for them to pull into some of the middle values. But if they don't, they're going to lose people.
Like what?
Some of the tougher issues on environment and on some of the issues on human rights and so on. I think if they, abortion, I think is a very touchy issue. Even for myself, I'm divided on it, and I think they're pulled very strongly to the right. I think it scares a lot of would-be younger Republicans back to the Democratic fold.
And you put yourself...
I'm right. I'm a strongly sitting right on the fence there, I think. And really, some of these issues are very difficult for the nation. They're very difficult for the parties. They're very difficult for individuals. It's hard to get off that fence. Abortion is a great example of that. I have a very difficult time with that issue. I value life. I've studied it and looked at what happens with a growing embryo and fetus, and it is life. And yet I have an awfully hard time telling people what to do with their bodies. A woman who's been raped, for example, and is pregnant from that. How can I tell her not to get an abortion? What right do I have to do that? So it, to me, is an ethical issue that I don't have an answer for. And it's a terrible dilemma. The country's very split on it, and I'm very split on it.
If you had a strong candidate taking a position on this issue, would it matter to you?
Getting back to what I said earlier, I'd appreciate a president who came out and said, this is a very difficult issue, and I'm not resolved on it. Our party's not resolved on it. And I think we need issues that are, we need leaders that are decisive, but it's okay not to be. These are complex problems. They're interrelated problems. And to just simply have answers scares me.
Martha McCormick is a registered Democrat and comes from a religious family. She is 27 years old and an 8th grade teacher who's been working in the Denver public school system for the past 5 years. She voted for Dukakis in 1988, but is unable to make up her mind this year because she is unimpressed with both candidates so far.
My current position on the whole thing is what it's been since I've been 18. And I get real discouraged because since I've been able to vote, I feel that the only people to vote for are the lesser of the two evils. And I'm always fighting the fact that I don't want to vote against someone. I'd rather vote for someone.
But based on what you've heard so far, who do you think is the best candidate to beat George Bush?
I don't feel that I can say. I can't intelligently say. I don't feel that I've got the ammunition to back up who I would choose at this point. If I chose Jerry Brown, I don't think that he could win if he went against George Bush. So therefore, I lean towards Clinton. But then again, I'm looking at the lesser of two evils. I feel that a lot of politicians manipulate language so that they can make you feel comfortable. And when he says something to protect his character, he's trying to make you feel comfortable. And since I'm smarter than that, it's not a comfortable feeling.
Why is honesty so important for you?
My parents brought me up to be honest. My husband at times has said that I'm too honest because it can get you into trouble sometimes to be real honest.
Does that come from your religious background?
I don't think so. I think I know people who are not necessarily religious but are just as honest. I think it's just how your parents or your family deals with a situation in the house of, who broke this. And honesty is the best policy. You might as well get it out and over with. And if you broke it, the consequences then look quicker.
Is that likely to be the cutting-edge issue for you in deciding honesty?
I would say so. I think the more honest they are, the less politically snaky they are. So honesty would be very important to me.
Where do you see the country heading?
I think this country is going downhill. I think we, as Americans, have this idea about ourselves that is false. It's a facade.
What idea?
That we are the best, that we have the only way that's right, that what worked 20 years ago or 50 years ago is going to work today. And I think that as an honest person, you need to look at yourself in the mirror, and as an American citizen or as a country, we need to look at ourselves and say, look, it's not working. The fact that we have so many people on welfare, the fact that we have so many people unemployed, and the fact that we have people that have to live on the streets, we need to look at ourselves hard and say things need to change, and the politics are not allowing us to do that.
What is it about the values that the Democratic Party holds that are consistent with your own?
I would say woman's choice is very important. That's one of the values. I think there's a different work ethic in the Democratic compared to Republicans.
Meaning?
That you can, if you have the education, that you can go where you want to go. You can make of yourself what you want to make, and that being born into money or having the right job or the right clothes is not necessarily important. And I guess part of that, and that's a funny line to draw between Republican and Democratic, But that's the line that I draw for whatever reason. I just feel that the Democrats tend to take people for who they are and not what their face value is, not what they drive, what they eat, how they dress.
What do you feel about the two candidates?
I don't feel that Clinton or Brown uphold the fact that we are who we are, and it's not who we pretend to be. So they don't follow what I feel is democratic at all.
Do you wish somebody else would get in the race?
I do, but I couldn't tell you who.
What is important to you?
My husband looks at how they act internationally, how they work overseas. Where I look at where I weigh them is on their ability to look at their own backyard and solve some of the social issues that we have going on in the United States.
You're a classroom teacher. Do any of your attitudes flow out of that?
I haven't heard them say much about what they would do for education. George Bush, on the other hand, what I've heard him say 4 years ago hasn't really mounted to much. It's been a lot of lip service. I don't feel that he's supporting education as he thought he would. He has done a couple of things where he's put together some programs, but for the most part, I don't feel that as a local classroom teacher, he's including me. I think he tends to look at the top, at the administration, and not at the people who are directly in contact with students to make those decisions. So he is the only one that I know of that has said anything out loud that has tried to follow through, and I don't even see him doing it. I would like to hear them talk more about how to make things work in the classroom. Research tells us that we need to have smaller classrooms, that we need to have smaller teacher-student ratio. And right now we're looking at budget cuts federally and locally that are going to force me to have more students in my classroom. And if I'm going to be preparing young people for the future, for a competitive, computerized society, I can't do it if I have 30 to 35 students in my class. It's hard enough to do it with 25 to 30. And we're looking at families that are changing. We no longer have a nuclear family. We no longer have a mother that can stay home and work with her children when they get home from school. We have two parents working. We have a single parent working. And so the overcrowding in the classroom is a negative effect on a child. And because as a teacher, when I have a child come into my classroom who has no family at home when they get home because mom or dad is working at night or both parents work or the single parent works, they don't have that support system. And so with the overcrowding, I could give him the support system if I didn't have 30 students to deal with. But if I had fewer, I could give that one-on-one attention. I could give the tutoring that is needed to help that child.
Why is this so important to you?
It's important to me because it's my business, it's my job. I am an educator, my profession, my choice. And it's also important to me because I look at the fact that someday I'm going to be old. Someday I'm going to need a young person to support me in some way. Be that person a nurse, be that person someone who runs this country. As an educator, I really depend a lot on these children. And I teach them hoping that they can become the American citizen that will support me when I'm old. So it's selfish in a way, but it needs to be done.
Are you so frustrated by the fact that you're not hearing what you think you want to hear from the candidates that you might not vote?
No, I would never not vote. I would...
Why is that important to you?
I think the biggest thing with that is because I hear a lot of people complain, and I get tired of people complaining a lot. So what I do is I figure if I vote, then I don't have a reason to complain because I gave my voice. I did what I needed to do as an American citizen. If I don't vote, I have no right to complain anymore.
And now on this Tuesday, another major presidential primary day, Gergen and Shields are here again to examine the stakes and the prospects. David Gergen is editor-at-large of U.S. News and World Report. Mark Shields is a syndicated columnist. He will be with us from Atlanta in a moment. They are joined tonight by Democratic pollster Peter Hart, who is here with David Gergen in Washington, and we expect Mark to arrive in a moment. First of all, David, what you just heard from the McCormicks, are they representative?
I think their questioning of candidates, they were very thoughtful, and they obviously troubled by the candidates they see. I think that's very representative. We know, and Peter can really speak to this, but we know about 2/3 or more of the people in the country now are not happy with the candidates' choices. When you look at the whole range, Democratic and Republican, so in that sense, I do think they're representative, and a lot of the questions they had about honesty and credibility are representative. The fact that they're planning to vote, nonetheless, perhaps is not as representative as we would like it to be.
Peter, has there ever been a time, this is a terrible question to ask you, just right off the top. We're glad you could be here with us tonight, Peter. But has there ever been a time when the people were satisfied with the choices they had for President of the United States, or is this a peculiar situation we have right now?
Well, I think there's always some doubt and uncertainty, but I think this is more like 1968. I mean, this has been a roller coaster, and what we forget is we're only at the halfway point. I mean, we've gone through everything that we've gone through, and we've reached the halfway point. And I think what we saw the McCormicks talking about, they're struggling through the process. If you listen to voters as they exit from New York, and I'm sure Wisconsin and Kansas, same thing. People are having a hard time dealing with this, and that's why the options keep growing rather than narrowing.
Well, Brown versus Clinton, to be specific, David. Frank Mankiewicz was quoted this morning in the New York Times that the Democrats have managed to make the choice between the only two Democrats who could not beat George Bush in November.
I think that's unduly pessimistic. It's going to be tough. I think that now both candidates have been harmed and damaged in this process, both Brown and Clinton.
How harmed and damaged?
Well, I think that Brown, of course, I think started with a strong disadvantage of the general electorate. Even though he might win a lot of votes among Democrats, he was dismissed by a number of people, both independent and Republican. I think he would have a very hard time crossing a threshold of credibility with both of those other groups. Bill Clinton, I think, has been increasingly damaged as the process has gone on, and I would argue, Jim, that the latest revelation over the weekend about his draft status, the fact that he got a draft induction notice, is perhaps as damaging and as serious as any indictment so far, and I think that...
Because he just failed to mention the fact that he had gotten this draft notice when he wrote that famous letter, you mean?
Well, I would argue that it's more serious than that. The heart of his defense on the draft issue before was that he had put himself into the draft like everybody else and got a high lottery number, and he happened to be lucky that his number was high and he never went. Now, in fact, we learned that he did get a draft induction notice, which is an order to go. And in fact, back in December, he told the Washington Post, when he met with the editors of that newspaper, that he had not been received a draft notice. He said it was a pure fluke that I was never called. In another quote, he said, I expected to be called while I was over there in England the first year, but they never did. Now, frankly, there are people at the Washington Post tonight who have serious questions about what they were told, and I think with good reason.
That's serious business to you, Peter?
Well, I think it is serious business, but for Bill Clinton, he's got to get through New York today. If he gets through New York, he has to start to erase some of those doubts and uncertainties. I mean, what David talks about are a continuation of a lot of doubts, and he's piling up the delegates. He has been winning, but at the same time, there's a certain percentage of voters that are uncertain, and what he has to do is to provide a sense of, you can trust me, you can understand where I'm coming from, and he has to be able to talk about the stakes. Up to now, he hasn't been able to. Go ahead.
But isn't that strange, that the man continues to win? Well, of course, he lost in Connecticut. We don't know what he's going to do tonight. But let's assume he wins tonight, and particularly New York. We'll be specific about that in a moment, but in the other states as well. Continues to get delegates, but he continues to go down as far as his negative perceptions. How do you explain that?
Well, the difficulty is that as he's winning, he's got Jerry Brown, and he's dealing with the press and everything else, and instead of dealing with what he needs to be, which are the issues, he creates the uncertainty in terms of the way he answers specific questions. And as David brings up a question about draft or a question of whether he inhaled or not, it's that kind of uncertainty.
Martha McCormick, for instance, told Charlene that None of the candidates except George Bush have talked about education. Well, Bill Clinton has talked endlessly about education and the debates and all of that, but it's been overshadowed, I guess, by all these other things.
There's no question about that. And of course, when she talked about George Bush, she said, and he's only given lip service to it, which only has added, of course, to the weight that the voters feel they're carrying. Bill Clinton feels very strongly that he has not been able to get his message out except episodically. That otherwise he's plagued by either whether it's the attacks from his opponents or attacks from the tabloids or indeed these stories about his personal background, that it's very, very hard for him. And his argument about New York even today was, if I don't win New York, it was only because I didn't have time to get my message out. Now, the Clinton activists believe that if he is able to clinch the nomination, he will then have more time to get his message out, and they think he will be a much stronger candidate than now is apparent. I mean, if the election were held today between George Bush and Bill Clinton, I don't think there's any doubt that George Bush would win a massive victory. But they hope and believe that over time he can rebuild and that he is a strong campaigner, and once people hear the message, they will then balance out all of these factors and he'll do better.
Can I just pick up on one point, and that is that there's a tendency to talk about Bill Clinton and only focus on Bill Clinton. George Bush has skated through the primaries, but hasn't solved any of his problems. He's got the same difficulties, the same uncertainties, and those are going to come back into focus at some stage. So I think what the McCormicks were saying, if we can pick up on them, in essence, both candidates have a lot of work to do to earn their spurs.
You know, Jim, we have a very strange situation tonight as we go into we await the New York results, where the leadership, as far as I can tell, of both parties wants Bill Clinton to win New York. The leadership of the Democratic Party would essentially like to get this race over with, and they think Clinton is the only man who can get this nomination now. So let's get it over with, rally behind him, and build the candidacy. The leadership of the Republican Party wants Bill Clinton to win because they think he's the most vulnerable Democrat, and they want to run against him now. They think that a stronger Democrat would come out of a brokered convention than would come out of this nomination process.
Does that make sense to you, Peter?
I can remember, I guess, 12 years ago when the Democrats and the Republicans were both rooting for Ronald Reagan, and only one of the two parties was right on that occasion.
Right, all the Carter people,
That's right.
Made.
Can't wait for it. So what looks
Reagan.
good in the spring often looks quite different in the fall.
Well, the Republicans think they'll be right twice in a row.
Wait and see, right?
Yeah.
Another possible scenario, the polls don't indicate this, but another possible scenario is that Jerry Brown does really well tonight in New York. What does that do? If that should happen, what does that do to things?
Well, I think we have to start off and say, look, this is a Clinton day, and that is he's either going to have a good day, a fair day, or a poor day. And if he wins all three and wins by large margins, let's say double digits in those states, it's a good Clinton day. If he loses in New York to Jerry Brown, it's a bad Clinton day, and I think that opens up the process. But assuming that Clinton wins, whether it be narrowly or large, he continues to be the front runner. If not, I think you have to say the psychology of the whole nomination changes, and you can look at the delegate numbers over here, but the psychology of what's going through will change very directly.
What about Paul Tsongas? Did he, he is supposedly, he has said he's going to take another look at it based on what the results are tonight in New York. Is it conceivable that he could come back in and make a difference?
Well, yes, I do. I think that's possible. I would agree with Peter absolutely on his analysis of the Clinton margins, whether he has a good, fair, or poor day. For Paul Tsongas, yes, I do. I think that's possible. I would agree with Peter absolutely on his analysis of the Clinton margins, whether he has a good, fair, or poor day. For Paul Tsongas, a good day, I would assume, Peter, would be over 20% in New York. That would
get him back in?
That I think would, if Bill Clinton has a fair day and Paul Tsongas has a good day, I mean, we're into that kind of thing.
If Clinton has a good day, then everybody else has a bad day. Is that
right?
Well, I think there's a lot of that, and the other thing is Paul Tsongas is a lot more appealing outside the ring than he is in the ring. If you remember, his best days was when he was a non-conventional politician. And when he became the conventional politician after New Hampshire and in the industrial states of Michigan and Illinois, he was less appealing. And my theory is that he becomes less appealing when he jumps back into it politically.
Speaking of jumping back into it politically, and I have news, Mark Shields has just arrived in our studio in Atlanta. Mark, just to go over things quickly, the new team of Gergen and Hart has just predicted that Brown's going to win New York. No, never mind. No, have you heard? Did you hear what they just said?
I didn't, Jim.
Well, the main thing is that Peter's thesis is that this is Clinton's day to make. It can either be a good day for him, it can be a fair day, it can be a poor day, and everything else is secondary to that. And that whether or not it's not Brown, it's not what. I'll just stop right there. You agree?
No. I have enormous respect. I have enormous respect for Peter, and I think that the Hart-Gergen team makes a lot of sense. I think Bill Clinton's problems aren't going to go away after today, regardless of what happens. And I really think he's got a serious setback. It was self-inflicted on the whole question of the draft, and it becomes a laugh line. Governor Ann Richards at a Washington dinner brought down the House with a reference to the silence of the crowd as being as quiet as the time that Vice President Quayle and Governor Clinton got together to swap combat stories. And I think that's really what Bill Clinton, it's a cumulative effect. I don't think even a victory in New York, a victory across the board tonight is going to take away those problems.
You mean that he is permanently damaged in a way that you don't think he can recover?
I think in a way that he has to address beyond just winning and beating. He's going to beat, if he beats Jerry Brown in New York, he beats him on two grounds. He beats him on the flat tax, which Jerry Brown is dropping like a bad habit at this point and moving away from. And he beats him on his embrace, Brown's embrace of Jesse Jackson as a running mate, something that Brown originally talked about in New Hampshire, but became an issue in New York where a third of the primary voters can be Jewish. And I think, those aren't addressing Bill Clinton's problems. What he's doing is exploiting the weaknesses, shortcomings of your opponent. And he is still left with those doubts.
You're nodding there, Peter.
Oh, absolutely. I think Mark's right that what Bill Clinton has done is run a tactical race. He always puts his candidate in a certain position, and he runs the negative ad. The difficulty is he's got to stop running for the nomination, and he's got to start running for president. And what that means is by being able to say, here's who I am, leveling with the people, and going out from here. And I don't think he's done it. He's done the other.
But David had mentioned, Mark, David had mentioned made the same point earlier that you did, that this thing on the draft this week is a terrific problem for Clinton. But use that specific. How does he do anything about it? He said it and he did it. Now, what in the world, with all the time in the world, how does he correct that?
Well, I think he's got to, what Bill Clinton has to do. And James McGregor Burns wrote a wonderful biography about Franklin Roosevelt called The Lion and the Fox. And all we've seen of Bill Clinton is the fox. It's sneaky. He's reminiscent of every teenager that a parent has had. When asked what time they came in last night, the answer is after midnight. They don't say 4:30. They never volunteer 4:30 in the morning. There's always sort of a trimming. What he has to do is show more of the lion. He has to do that in a way that shows a boldness, a willingness to take on tough issues, to take on an occasional constituency, which he has shown a precious little willingness to do thus far. He keeps talking about vetoing a National Rifle Association gun bill in Arkansas, but this campaign has been a kind of a, what do you want, and I'll give it to you, and New York being the most recent example.
David?
So
I was just going to ask David here in a few seconds we have left.
I don't agree with that, but I think he's somehow got to find a speech format in which he can talk to the American people about his honesty. I think he basically has
got a problem.
He's got a problem, and I think this draft problem has not gotten a lot of attention because it's been overshadowed by just the horse race. But it's going to come back to haunt him.
No matter what happens.
No matter what happens in New York.
Okay. Well, on that note of agreement, we're going to leave it. I'm really glad you could join us, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Next tonight, Japanese-American bashing. Civil rights groups report that hate crimes directed against Asian Americans, especially those of Japanese ancestry, are on the rise. They say trade tensions with Japan and the ongoing recession are to blame for this increase in racism. Correspondent Jeffrey Kay of public station KCET Los Angeles prepared this report.
The public smashing of Japanese-made cars and electronic products has become a familiar image to many TV viewers. This demolition in February was part of an American Pride Day, sponsored by a labor union in Flint, Michigan. Japanese-American activists view such stunts with alarm.
To me, the message is a violent one.
Dennis Hayashi is national director of the Japanese-American Citizens League.
The only thing you pick up from that is that Japan, products associated with Japan, and by association, Japanese people, and by further association, Japanese Americans are becoming the enemy. Since the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, we have seen a steady increase in the level of racial intimidation and in the number of incidents reported to our offices of racial harassment.
Recently, vandals trashed a Japanese-American cultural center in Norwalk, California. Racist slogans were painted on the windows. At a Claremont, California college, a sign supporting Asian American studies was defaced to read, "Asian Americans die now."
What concerns us more is that it's moved beyond just racial taunts or epithets. It's moving into threats of physical violence or actual acts of physical violence. So, for example, in the month of January, there were 2 different incidents involving bombs placed at Japanese-American restaurants where they just blew out the windows. In San Leandro, California, there were Molotov cocktails thrown at the home of an elderly Japanese-American couple.
Many in the Japanese-American community say these incidents remind them of the hatred Japanese Americans experienced during World War II. Today in Los Angeles, a museum exhibit commemorates the 50th anniversary of the internment of some 120,000 Japanese Americans.
Japanese evacuated from strategic West Coast areas show little apparent regret. They seem relieved, and some say it's like a holiday.
Many of the members, of our organization who were interned at the time have remarked to me how similar they feel the atmosphere is. They're saying the same type of signs, sort of the same legitimization of the term Jap. I mean, that seems to be becoming almost an accepted part of dialogue. It's no longer a racial slur.
While many in the Japanese-American community are reluctant to speak out, activists feel they have an obligation to counter what they see as a rising tide of racist sentiment.
The forum will focus on the current Japan bashing.
At a recent Los Angeles meeting of the Korean American Coalition, a group of young professionals, Japanese Americans appealed for solidarity among Asians.
Now that there are more Asians in the United States, I think that all of us become targets in terms of the American confusion about what all the different Asian ethnic groups are about. Most folks can't tell the difference, by looking at you guys out there, by looking at us, up here.
I have some buttons at home. One button says Chinese American. They're buttons that were worn during World War II by Chinese saying, well, we're not them. We don't want to be associated with them because, what you do to them, we don't want that to happen to us. What I was going to bring tonight is I have another button that says Korean American. Because a few Koreans that were around, we say, well, that's a pretty good idea. I'm going to get me one of those buttons. So those buttons existed as well. That's not going to happen this time, and it can't happen.
But some members of this Korean American audience expressed suspicion and mistrust of Japanese Americans. They recalled the long-standing animosity between Koreans and Japanese.
And how can we support, American Japanese here when we see our Koreans in Japan suffering?
Well, you need to understand that, that as a third-generation Japanese American, my relationship with Japan is about as distant as yours in terms of what I can do to impact what's happening in Japan.
But I don't see that as true because you're here working for Japanese ideology.
I'm an American. I was born here. I was raised here. I think that's something that's important not to get confused. That's part of the problem that goes on with the Japan bashers, and that's where our interest stands from. Like, if Japan is unfair, that's fine. We ought to deal with that issue, and that's my interest as an American to deal with that. If there's a trade imbalance that's not fair, I know which side of that I'm on because my interests are on the American side of that. But if they're going to beat up anyone who looks Japanese, my interests are not with that. And I think you have to separate those two things.
What I was wondering was, do you get any support from Japan with respect to this? What kind of relationship do you have as Japanese Americans to the Japanese government?
And in terms of, I guess, my organization's role, I mean, if that's what you're asking, is that we don't have one. You know, the JACL is a domestic organization.
Members of the JACL, the Japanese American Citizens League, are also criticizing the Buy American movement. They say it is tinged with racism.
We found out that a sixth grade elementary school teacher in a South Central elementary school here in Los Angeles assigned to her class the project of drawing what they thought the Buy American campaign meant. Many of the drawings came back with explicitly racial themes. They would show a Caucasian child kicking a slant-eyed child in the butt saying no to Japan. A couple of the drawings had bomb, bomb, bomb to Japanese. One child had drawn a Bart Simpson who said, yes, American, no, Japanese.
Cartoons drawn by professionals, like this one from the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, are lampooning the perception of Japan as America's new enemy. Mr. President, we are retargeting the missiles as ordered, says a military commander. The instruction goes out, switch from the air base at Minsk to the Mitsubishi plant in Nagoya. Mitsubishi Electric America, headquartered in Cypress, California, is starting to feel the fallout from the Buy America movement. The Japanese-owned company has received letters from American customers promising to boycott its products. The chairman of Mitsubishi Electronics America is Tachi Kaiuchi. He would like to see a better understanding of Mitsubishi's contribution to the U.S. economy.
My message is always, for instance, this is Mitsubishi Electronics America.
And many of your products are made in America?
Yes. And not only that, engineered here, some products are developed here.
What percentage of the products that Mitsubishi America sells in the United States is actually made here?
About 45%, I think. Yes, yes. We have 6 production facilities, and 45% of what we sell are made here locally.
Kaiuchi is also president of the Japan Business Association of Southern California, the JBA. He feels Japanese businesses must do a better job of convincing Americans that they are good corporate citizens. His is a view shared by another JBA member, Norris Hattori, president of Makita USA, the tool manufacturer. Makita employs 1,000 American workers. 50% of Makita's domestic sales are of tools made in the USA. Like other Japanese corporations, Makita is stepping up its involvement in community affairs. Recently, on behalf of the Japan Business Association, Makita's Hattori contributed $64,000 in goods and cash to schools in Orange County, California. The donations reflect the growing philanthropy of Japanese companies. Japanese corporate contributions to U.S. charities increased tenfold between 1986 and 1990, according to one report, which put total donations at $300 million. Norris Hattori takes a somewhat familial view of the obligation of Japanese corporations.
And actually, you know, the relation between the United States and Japan, I used to say, big brother and small brother, something like that. And a big brother used to teach a small brother how to do, and he said, you hard work and you study harder. Mm-hmm. And the small, you know, the brother, he did it in that way.
And now?
Then now, he grown up and he got money. Then the big brother, you know, no money, so I asked the small brother, give me a little money. And the small brother said, why I have to give you the money? Right? But I said, you know, the little brother cannot, you know, forget about what happened when he was young.
Mitsubishi has established a philanthropic foundation with an endowment of $15 million.
A lot of people are saying, hey, Japanese people are trying to buy image. Mm-hmm. And we know that money is just part of our, you know, the contribution. You know, that's what it is, that it should be. And important thing is personal involvement. And that's what we lack. We don't have enough personal involvement.
And that's increasing?
I think so, yes.
Kaiuchi says Japanese firms here must do more to change what he sees as a growing colonial attitude towards doing business in the U.S.
When I first came here, I was more nervous. I did a lot of preparation. But these days, you know, you don't have to speak English. You don't have to do anything American. It's like another colony of Far East.
Yeah.
But people just take it easy and don't make any preparation. That's no good. That makes this Buy American sentiment stronger. And we must change that.
You think Japanese people here should do more to try to fit in?
Yes. Please. It's almost sickening.
As growing numbers of Americans join unemployment lines, the Buy American sentiment is likely to increase. And civil rights groups say they fear the volatile combination of a tight economy and rising nationalism might fuel more hate crime.
Again, the major stories of this Tuesday. Primary elections are being held in New York, Wisconsin, Kansas, and Minnesota. The polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern Time in New York, 8 p.m. everywhere else. An underground gas pipeline exploded in Texas, killing at least one person and injuring 16. And the United States suspended aid to Peru as President Fujimori expanded his crackdown there and arrested more opposition leaders. Good night, Robin.
Good night, Jim. That's the News Hour for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more analysis of tonight's primary results. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night.
Part of helping the world